All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Kansas City Golf Association World Headquarters. We have a bit of a different format for today's video. Rules 12 and 13 I'll be presenting from the Rules Hub here at my desk. Our videographer is not available for St. Andrews next week, so we are just going to go ahead and do it from here. So there'll be just straight interactions of me and the camera going through all the information. It will be a shorter video, but obviously there will be no questions or anything going on with the crowd, so we should get through this pretty quick. All right, so let's start today talking about rules 12 and 13, which are going to cover bunkers and putting greens. The golf course has now been divided into 5 parts instead of 4 like it was in the previous rules, and 2 of the parts are now bunkers and putting greens. Bunkers was split from hazards into penalty areas and bunkers, so there are some specific rules that will cover what you can and cannot do when your ball is in a bunker versus a penalty area. And the putting greens are going to still have their own rule like they did previously. All right, so let's talk about bunkers. Rule 12. We have divided into 3 different spots here. We're going to figure out when your ball is in a bunker, what we're going to do when you're playing the ball in the bunker, and there's specific things that we can and cannot do when your ball is in the bunker, and those will all be covered in these 3 subsets of Rule 12. All right, the purpose statement for bunkers. It's a rule that is specifically there for the area of the golf course defined as bunkers, which are specifically prepared areas that are hollowed out with sand in them, intended to test the player's ability to play the ball from the sand, which is why you will see loose impediments and other obstructions in the way can now be removed from the bunker when you are playing from a bunker, because that challenge is based on the sand shot, not something getting in the way of that shot. To make sure that player confronts this challenge, there are some restrictions that we are going to have when you're in the bunkers on touching the sand before the stroke is made and even during the stroke is made, and where relief may be taken if we are going to proceed underneath a certain rule within the bunker. All right, some significant changes. As I mentioned earlier, we can now remove loose impediments when your ball is in the bunker. However, the restriction will still apply of your ball moving. If you do remove a loose impediment, your ball moves, so please be careful moving your ball when your ball is in a bunker. The limited prohibitions on touching the sand. There were some times that you could touch the sand and sometimes that you couldn't. So now those prohibitions, have been limited. So there's very few times that you're now not allowed to touch the sand. So a couple of additional times we can touch the sand that we were not allowed to before, and we'll of course get into those in depth here shortly. A new unplayable lie option has been added to the bunkers. There was a belief by many players in the past that you could take a ball out of a bunker for an unplayable lie. The only time you could do that is if you return to the spot of the previous stroke and distance for the unplayable lie. However, there is now a new relief option for a 2-stroke penalty that you can take the ball back on a line out of a bunker. So if you're not a very good bunker player, or you just have a horrible lie or don't like what the result would be if you took an unplayable lie and left it in the bunker, now you can take that ball out of the bunker for 2 strokes. The margins of the bunker have been redefined a little bit. Things such as the wall of the bunker and the lip of the bunker, the face of the bunker are no longer part of the bunker. And it's very important to know where the ball is on a golf course, as we know, so that the correct rules may be applied in the correct parts of the golf course. We will get into that also a little bit deeper as well. So let's talk about the definition of a bunker, what it actually is, and what we need to know so that we know if our ball is actually in a bunker or what we can do at that point. One of the 5 areas designed for the golf course is a special area prepared with sand in it, and sand is a very unique material on a golf course. There's different things that we can do with a golf ball when it is in sand, whether it's in a bunker or whether it's in the general area. But we will make sure that we know when the ball is in a bunker, and the area of sand is one of the things that is very important that the ball is touching for the ball to be in a bunker. The turf or soil was removed, obviously hollowed out is what they're talking about. It doesn't have to be deep, but if the turf has been removed specifically to create a bunker, then we do have a bunker. And I will go over some differences of that of when we don't have a bunker. Okay, things that are not part of the bunker here is kind of the negative definition of the bunker here is, as I mentioned, the lip, wall, or face. So at any point, if your ball is in this wall right here, you are in the general area, you are not in the bunker. Okay, inside the edge of the bunker, there's a couple of things that are going to show that our ball is in the bunker. So once we have that inside edge hollowed out and defined of what we know the bunker is supposed to be. If your ball is inside that edge of the bunker, any growing or natural object within that bunker is not part of the bunker. The church pews here is a good example of what is not part of the bunker. So if your ball is at rest on that little island of soil and grass there, your ball is in the general area, even though it is completely contained within the bunker. Okay. Soil, again, any soil that's part of that, so it doesn't have to be just grass, so the soil part of it is also not part of the bunker. And sand that is spilled over the outside edge. So in this example here, we have some sand that is outside of where the edge has been created for the bunker, and that is not part of the bunker, that is in the general area. And of course, then that sand cannot be moved with your hand or your club or any way to clear out your place to make a stroke, because it is considered outside of the bunker. Okay, so some other areas of sand that are not parts of bunkers, such as waste areas. The TPC Sawgrass tournament course, the stadium course down there, has a lot of cart paths that are made up of sand, and so do other golf courses, but this is the one I can think of offhand, that run through what look like bunkers, but those areas are actually waste areas and are considered the general area, so they are not part of a bunker, so the bunker rules would not apply in that area. Okay, so when is a ball in a bunker under 12.1? We're going to talk about when that ball is in the bunker, and another good example of the rules book here is there are some diagrams and illustrations that will help us out to determine whether or not that ball is in the bunker for this specific rule. So a ball is in a bunker when any part of the ball touches sand on the ground on the inside edge of the bunker. So obviously our example here with the green check mark, this ball is in the bunker because it is inside the margins and touching sand. Okay, or if it rests on the ground where sand would normally be. And what this means is if, for example, during a washout, if the water had washed out some of the sand and your ball falls into that little area of the washout, your ball is still considered to be in the bunker. So if there is supposed to be sand there and there's not, you are still in the bunker. Okay, or if it is inside that edge and lies on something such as a loose impediment or a movable obstruction, an abnormal course condition or integral object. So if your ball is in an area of water that is within a bunker and it's in temporary water, you are still within the bunker. Now you can proceed under the temporary water rule, but you are going to stay within the bunker based on the relief options for the bunker. Okay. Other growing or attached natural objects, as we talked about, the church pews are not part of the bunker. Just pointing this out with this as well. So again, the red X showing us that the ball is actually in the general area because it is not touching any sand, or it's not in the bunker by definition. Okay. As we saw in Rule 2.2, there is a hierarchy of the way that the areas of the course are now, and it's spelled out pretty clear for us. So if a ball is both in a bunker and another part of the golf course, the ball is considered to be in the bunker. There is one exception to this rule, is if the ball is also touching a penalty area. The penalty area has the highest hierarchy on the golf course, so at any time if a ball is touching a penalty area, it's in the penalty area. The bunker is now second, so if the bunker is touching a putting green or the general area and the ball is touching both as well, the ball is going to be in the bunker by definition. Okay. This rule for the bunkers applies during the round and also while play is stopped. So if we have a stoppage in play and you go out on the golf course, the rules will still apply for the bunker as well. Okay, so if we play our ball from a bunker, what can we do? We can remove without penalty. We can remove loose impediments now, which is a big change in the new rules. This includes any natural objects. The definition of loose impediments would be twigs, leaves, and stones, and so on and so forth. Again, if the ball moves during this process, we're going to replace it with a one-stroke penalty. Okay, movable obstructions, there's no change here. We've always been able to remove a movable obstruction, such as a scorecard or a can here. The most common one would be a rake. So if you have your ball in a bunker and you want to move any artificial object that is a movable obstruction, you may, and there will be no penalty if your ball moves at this point for moving a movable obstruction. You move the ball, you're going to replace it with no penalty. Movable obstructions would also include stakes for a penalty area. So if you have a bunker up against a penalty area and your ball is in the bunker, you can remove that stake as well. It is a movable obstruction. Again, if the ball moves, we're just going to replace it without penalty. Okay, so now there are some restrictions we're going to talk about on touching the sand in the bunker when we're playing the ball from the bunker under 12.2b. So we're going to find out when touching the sand will result in a penalty and when touching the sand does not result in a penalty, and what we can do once we've played the ball from the bunker and the ball is outside of that bunker. Most of these restrictions and rules are very similar to what we're used to, a couple of little tweaks that we're going to have. Okay, so when touching sand results in a penalty, before making a stroke at a ball in the bunker, a player must not deliberately touch sand in the bunker with a hand, club, rake, or other objects. So there's that word deliberately again that we are very keen on, especially in the new rules. But if they deliberately do this to test the condition of the sand, whether how wet it is or how deep it is, or any other information they're trying to get from testing, they are going to incur a penalty at this point. Okay. So if that information is learned deliberately, that player will incur a penalty. It'll be the general penalty, so it'll be either a loss of whole match play or 2 strokes and stroke play. Okay, we cannot make a practice swing. So if you make a practice swing with touching the sand, you are going to incur the general penalty as well. Making a practice swing without touching the sand is okay, as long as you don't touch the sand with your club. And this is going to be true anywhere in the bunker that your ball is in. So it's not near your ball, it's the entire bunker. You cannot go and take practice swings away from your ball and think that that's okay. Okay. In making your backswing, you cannot touch the sand. This is, again, not a change. This is the way that it has always been in the rules of golf. So as that club is moving away from the golf ball, it has to stay above the sand and cannot scoop sand out of the way or even accidentally touch the sand. That would be a violation of this rule as well. Okay. We also, at address or in general, we cannot touch the sand near our ball, whether it's behind the ball or in front of the ball or off to the side. We're not allowed to ground our club near our ball when our ball is in a bunker. Okay. There are some exceptions to the rule, as we know. There's plenty of exceptions in the rules of golf, but when you're searching for your ball, you're allowed to use your hand or a club to kind of uncover the sand if you're trying to find where your ball might be in a bunker, so there's no penalty there under these exceptions here. Or if you're removing loose impediments, removable obstructions, you can use your club to kind of scoop it away. If you inadvertently hit the sand, you're going to be okay. If you use your hand and you pick up a loose impediment, there's a good chance you're going to hit some sand as well. So the exception here will apply, and there'll be no penalty for touching the sand in that manner. Okay, so touching sand is not a penalty under these following circumstances. And we do have a little asterisk here kind of pointing something out, that as long as you do not improve the conditions affecting your stroke as laid out in 8.1a. So if you are actually trying to improve your conditions and touching sand, 8.1a is going to come in and give you a penalty in that situation. So, for example, digging in with your feet to take a stance. As we always know, you can get in there, get a good grip, as long as you don't do this excessively and kind of like move your feet around like a bull or something like that to get really deep. That's not allowed. But using reasonable actions, as we've talked about in the rules of golf, you may take stance with your feet. Smoothing to care for the course. So if there are some footprints that are around your ball that do not affect your areas of your intended stroke or those conditions affecting your stroke, you're allowed to do this, provided it's simply for the care of the course. If you have an ulterior motive of trying to clear up some sand near your ball, then this rule would apply and you would be getting a penalty. So again, we're going to trust the player to do the right thing and care for the course, and hopefully they will make sure that they are doing that in the right way and not helping out their stroke incidentally on purpose. Placing equipment or other objects in the bunker is fine. This rule has changed over the years. You used to not be able to place your clubs in there, but that changed a number of years ago. But it's been the same for a while now. So you can bring in 4 or 5 golf clubs, set them down, make your stroke and move on, you're fine. Putting a rake in there is fine as well. Some things that you cannot do, you cannot stick the rake into the ground, like with a handle end, to see how deep it is. Or dig your club in for the same reason, but you can just simply place them in there. You can toss them down fine, provided you don't move your ball or improve the conditions affecting your stroke. Anytime you are measuring, marking, or lifting or replacing a golf ball, no matter where it is on the golf course, you are going to be exempt from penalty, and the bunker is no different. So if you're measuring to see who's further away, or maybe you're trying to find a relief spot and putting clubs down, and you accidentally move your ball or touch the sand, you're going to be okay and you're not going to get a penalty. Taking actions under a rule, for example, lifting a ball. If you are doing something that another rule will allow you to do, you can touch the sand and you'll be okay. So that includes using your club or your hand. Leaning on a club. So anytime you lean on a club, you're going to be fine. That would include getting into the bunker using your club as a cane. If you were going to slip and fall and you put your club down, no problem there. Or if you're just simply waiting to play and you're leaning on your club, provided you're not improving the area of your swing or your stance or any of those conditions affecting your stroke, you're going to be fine under this exemption. And a good one for me, striking the sand in anger is not a penalty. That is a bit of a change. So if you leave the ball in the bunker, or if you just walk into the bunker and you're not happy and you slam your club down and your ball's in the same bunker, you're fine. Again, provided you don't improve the area of your intended swing. Okay, and once your ball is outside the bunker, we have lots of things that we can do. Even if the rules don't allow it somewhere else, this rule will allow it. So here's an example. I'm going to come up with authority overriding prohibition, and I'll give you a couple of examples here in just a minute. Okay, we can touch the sand without penalty once you've played a ball from the bunker and it is outside the bunker, which means raking, taking a practice swing. Again, those exemptions, the anger or care of the course, all that stuff, no penalty at all once your ball is outside of the bunker. Okay, this is true even when you take a stroke in distance back in the bunker. So here's the example that I was going to tell you about where prohibition is going to be overridden by the authority of this rule. So if you play a ball from a bunker and the ball goes out of bounds and you're required to come back and drop a ball in the spot that you just played from in that relief area, you are allowed to smooth the sand in that point. Knowing that you are still going to drop a ball into a relief area in the bunker, this rule allows this to happen once your ball has been played from a bunker and is outside the bunker. So no penalty there. You're allowed to improve the conditions affecting the stroke because of this authority in this rule here, number 12. Okay. The improved area is now in your line of play from outside the bunker. So for example, if you hit a bunker shot backwards, you were up against the lip and you had to go backwards and you chipped it out and you raked all those footprints and your divot and all the explosion that you did there that's still on your line of play going back over that bunker, this rule exempts you from penalty because your ball was played from a bunker and then is now outside that bunker. So that's a couple of good examples of when you're allowed to improve your line of play, if you will. Okay. Again, Rule 12.2b allows you to touch the sand without penalty at any time once your ball is out of the bunker when you've played it from the bunker, without exception. Smoothing sand in the bunker for the care in the course without penalty is going to be pretty much true anywhere, provided that you do not make your sand much better for your next stroke. But once we're talking about, again, the ball being played out of the bunker, that exemption goes away. So just wanted to go over those things first, but I just kind of skipped over those little parts right there because that's just the rule talking about it. Again, the exemptions of playing a ball stroke and distance, or if your ball is going to be outside of the bunker. I just put a couple extra slides in there, but that's the same rule that we're talking about there. Okay, one thing to note before I move on here, get back to that one. Okay, so the restrictions will come back into place once you drop that ball. So for example, the stroke and distance. You hit a ball from the bunker that goes out of bounds and you come back, you rake the bunker, smooth your footprints, you're fine. Once you put the ball back into play by dropping it, now those restrictions are back in place. So if you forget to rake a couple of footprints or something like that, and then you rake them at that point, now the restrictions are back in place and you will be penalized. So again, once the ball is immediately outside of the bunker, we have no restriction, but once you put a ball into play, those restrictions are back in force. Okay, penalty for breach of Rule 12.2 is the general penalty, so 2 strokes in stroke play and a loss of hole in match play. And now we're going to move on to 12.3 for the specific rules for relief for a ball in a bunker, and just kind of the way that this rule is lined out is it tells you to go to a different rule. So we know that we can take unplayable ball relief in a bunker, or if we have an abnormal course condition such as temporary water, dangerous animals, so on and so forth. What it is this rule is going to do is say the rules still apply in the bunker, but you're going to go to that specific rule to see how we're going to take that relief. So for example, interference by an abnormal course condition, you're going to go see Rule 16.1c. It's not going to list it out here of what to do. Interference by the dangerous animal condition, we're going to go to 16.2. In an unplayable ball, we're going to go to 19.3. So these rules still apply in the bunker, but they're just not listed in Rule 12. They're listed in their specific rules of relief. And they will address the bunker as well within those rules. All right, that's Rule 12, so I'll go over a couple of questions that I have here for you that hopefully you can figure out. And if not, I'll tell you what the answer is. So in stroke play event, Jackie's ball is at rest in a bunker. She goes to a spot in the same bunker 20 feet away from her ball. She takes a firm stance and makes 3 practice swings without touching the sand. Which of the following is true? So A, Jackie's not penalized unless her ball comes to rest in the area she made the practice swings. Or B, Jackie is not penalized since she did not touch the sand. C, Jackie's penalized 2 strokes for testing the condition of the bunker. Or D, Jackie is disqualified. The answer is going to be Jackie is not penalized since she did not touch the sand during her practice swings. Taking a stance is allowed anywhere in the bunker, not just where her ball is, so she's okay to do that, provided she doesn't improve her area of intended swing or her stance. But she's okay to take a stance anywhere. The practice swings are fine as long as she doesn't touch the sand within the bunker that her ball was in, so there'll be no penalty there. So that's all we have for rule number 12. And we're going to move on to rule number 13 about putting greens. The putting greens are also divided up into 3 different spots or 3 different ways within the way the rule is going to be applied. We're going to talk about things that we can do on the putting greens. The flag stick has used to have its own rule, but is now included in this rule with putting greens. Makes sense since that's where the flag stick is. And then we're going to talk about the ball overhanging the hole. A lot of changes within the putting greens, and so we're going to hit those very specifically and make sure that we understand the new rules and how they are applied on the putting greens. This rule is a specific rule for putting greens that are specially prepared for playing the ball along the ground. There's a flag stick in the hole on each putting green, so certain different rules apply than other areas of the course. So again, it's another one of those 5 areas of the course, and we'll need to know when our ball is on the putting green. Some notable changes for the rules with putting green is almost all damage to the putting green can now be repaired. There are quite a few examples of we cannot fix those, but there is so much more that we can actually do now. We've talked about this before, and a lot of people have heard about being able to tap down spike marks, but of course the undue delay is something that we're going to make sure that we're taking care of when that player is fixing damage on a putting green. There's no penalty for an accidental movement of a ball or ball marker on the putting green. Most of us have been playing underneath this local rule since January 1st of 2018, but it is now a rule of golf. And so now anytime the ball is accidentally moved on the putting green, there's going to be no penalty, and the ball is going to be replaced. A little change here as well. So if a player's ball has been lifted or moved and the ball moves after being replaced, that ball now owns that spot on the putting green. The player will play from that spot no matter what causes the ball to move. We will get into that in depth here, but basically once you mark and lift your ball on the putting green, no matter what happens after that, when you replace it, we're going to play from that spot. So the wind, gravity, anybody else, an outside influence, all these different things that move that ball, we're going to replace it on that spot that the ball now owns on the putting green. Interference from a wrong green now includes the player's stance. It used to be just the lie of the ball in the area of intended swing, but now if a player has a stance on a wrong putting green, they are required to take relief. Player may now leave the flag stick in the hole when playing from anywhere, which now includes the putting green, and gets no penalty if his or her ball in motion strikes it. That is true if it's an accident, but if a deliberate action hits the flag stick, we will talk about that. What is a deliberate action, what will be exempt from penalty, and what will not be exempt from penalty. All right, 13.1 is kind of divided up quite a bit into some different areas. The actions that are allowed on the putting greens, there are quite a few, and some things that we can and cannot do are going to be discussed in these next 6 little sub-bullet points that we're talking about here. But the first thing that's important to notice is the purpose statement that 13.1 has all on its own, which shows that there's a lot going on in this rule. So this rule allows the player to do things on the putting green that are normally not allowed off the putting green, such as being allowed to mark, lift, clean, and replace a ball, repair damage, remove loose soil and sand, which cannot be done anywhere except the putting green and the teeing area. And there's no penalty for accidentally causing a ball or ball marker to move off the putting green. So the purpose statement kind of tells us what we can expect from this rule. Okay, so pretty simple to start off with. 13.1a, when is the ball on the putting green? It's pretty simple. Ball's on the putting green when any part of it touches the putting green. This does not include overhanging. So the ball must actually touch the putting green. If the ball is barely touching the putting green and also touching the general area, we know from earlier that the ball is actually touching the putting green. You may mark, lift, clean, and do everything that you can do on a putting green since your ball is on the green, which may include putting your marker off the putting green. There's no problem doing that. Okay. The ball is also on the putting green if it lies on or anything, such as a loose impediment or a movable obstruction, and is on the inside edge of the putting green. So we've got two things that have to happen there. It has to be inside that area around the green that has been mowed to the putting green height, and be on an object that is on the putting green as well. So again, if part of the ball touches both the putting green and another area of the course, see Rule 2.2c, but we don't have to now because I've already told you the ball's on the putting green. Now, if it's touching the putting green and a penalty area, it is in the penalty area. If the ball is touching the putting green and a bunker, the ball is in a bunker. So you got to remember the hierarchy listed there in Rule 2.2c. Okay, a ball on the putting green may be lifted and cleaned, also covered in Rule 14.1. But the spot of the ball must be marked before it is lifted, and the ball must be replaced on its original spot. A couple important things to notice about this statement here is the spot of the ball must be marked, so we have a requirement. So if the ball is not marked, we're going to have a penalty, so make sure that we mark the ball. And the ball must be replaced. So it's important to note that substitution is not allowed in this situation, so you must put the ball back into position. There are a couple of rules that will allow substitution, such as the ball not being immediately recoverable, but in general you're not allowed to replace your ball, or substitute your ball during replacement on the putting green. Okay, under 13.1c, a few changes have happened here to talk about improvements allowed on the putting green. So during a round and while play is stopped, this rule is covered, so at any time, a player may take these two actions on the putting green no matter whether the ball is on or off the putting green. So this is not a specific change, but we're going to get into some different changes here as well. You can remove sand and loose soil when they're on the putting green, and remember they're not defined as loose impediments anymore. They're part of the golf course, but they can be moved on the putting green by this rule, and repair of damage. And we're going to have an extensive list of what can be repaired and what cannot be repaired on the putting green. And again, please note that if your ball is off the putting green, you are still allowed these things that you can do on the putting green. Okay, so let's talk about removal of sand and loose soil. Sand and loose soil on the putting green can be removed, but not elsewhere on the course may be removed without penalty. Now, the teeing area is also allowed for that to happen, but generally it's not really talked about all that much, but it is an allowance within the rules that you can remove sand and loose soil in the teeing area. Okay, repair of damage. So what do we have for some things that we can repair with our damage on the putting green? Player may repair damage on the putting green without penalty by taking reasonable actions to restore the putting green as nearly as possible to its original condition. So you can't improve the putting green, so to speak, such as creating a trough for your golf ball, or moving stuff into position and building up something that might make your golf ball go a little bit higher or faster. Things like that you're not allowed to do. You must restore it to the original condition. And here's a good video of what we're talking about.
The 2019 rules allow you to repair almost any damage on the putting green. In addition to ball marks and old hole plugs, you are allowed to repair spike marks and any other damage caused by shoes, repair animal damage, and repair damage caused by maintenance practices. The fixing and repairing of the putting green must be done promptly and must not improve your line of play beyond the repair of the damage.
Okay, and that's a video we've seen a number of times there, but that is a really good idea of things that we can fix on the putting green. Okay, when you are using these rules to your advantage and repairing that damage, there are certain ways that you have to do it. For example, you can use your hand, your foot, or any other part of the body. So if you want to get down there and roll your body over it, fine. Help yourself to that one. Just don't damage the green. You can use a normal ball mark repair tool, a tee or a club, or a similar item. So this is a list of things that we normally use to repair damage or repair pitch marks and so on and so forth, but you can't use things that are above and beyond that, like a garden tool or something like that. Things that normally are not used would not be allowed to be used in this rule. Okay. Again, you must not unreasonably delay play. So we talked about tapping down spike marks your entire length of a long putt. You're not allowed to do. An unreasonable delay will be defined as what the committee sees. So if you repair 6 or 7 pitch marks, a few spike marks, you're probably going to be okay, provided there's not a delay of play. But if that committee thinks you're delaying play, then this rule will now be available for you to be penalized under. Okay. So if you take actions that exceed what is reasonable, for example, you get like a tamp and start tamping stuff down or something like that, So you're doing something that is not restoring the putting green to its original condition, you're going to get the general penalty for a breach of 8.1a. So you're not getting penalized under 13, but you're getting penalized somewhere else in the rules book in this situation. The general penalty would apply, loss of hole in match play and 2 strokes in stroke play, if you're doing things that are not considered reasonable in repairing damage to the putting green. Okay, some examples of some things that we can fix. Ball marks, as we've always been able to do. Shoe damage is new, such as spike marks or scuffs or things like that that have happened by somebody not picking up their feet. I'm sure we've all played a round of golf but behind somebody that doesn't seem to know how to walk on the putting greens. You're allowed to tap down all those little scrapes and scuffs now. Indentations caused by equipment or flag stick. So if you see somebody had dropped a club, but a more important, very solid example that we see a lot is damage around the hole with the flag stick. So if that flag stick was tried to put back in the hole and they hit the edge of the cup or something like that and cause a little dent there, this rule allows you to fix that and restore it to its natural conditions or natural original dimensions of the hole. This is a change. You were not allowed to fix the hole before, but now with the damage that's caused by a flag stick around the hole, you're allowed to fix that. Okay. Old hole plugs, turf plugs, seams of cut turf, scrapes or indentations from maintenance tools or vehicles. So these are included in what the old rules allowed us to do. The new changes, again, are the scrapes or indentations from maintenance vehicles or in their fixing. That is new. But again, there's a lot of different things of damage that we can fix now. Animal tracks and hoof indentations. So if you have the deer running across the green early in the morning, before we had to have the committee declare that to be ground under repair for you to get relief from it. Now you're allowed to fix it, but if you want to take relief, you have to also still have that committee approval. That's not automatically ground under repair for an abnormal course condition, but you are allowed to tap it down or fix it or restore it to its original condition. Embedded objects. I got a little picture here of a large chunk of ice from an ice storm that went into a green there, but other objects such as stones, acorns, things that have been pushed down by mowing or by somebody walking, you can go ahead and take those out and fix the hole that it caused theirs too, and that is again a change from the old rule. Okay, let's talk about some things that we can't do as far as repairing damage now. We've had a lot of positive things, and there's a couple of things now that we need to talk about that are still not allowed by this new rule. Normal practices for maintenance, the overall condition of the putting green, such as aeration holes and grooves from vertical mowing, are not allowed to be repaired. If a player was going to repair all the aeration holes, you can imagine how long that would take. So, example of something that we cannot do is going to be this normal practice that is going to be prevalent in a lot of greens out there. You're going to see vertical cutting throughout the year. You're going to see aeration a couple times during a year. These are not allowed to be fixed underneath this rule. If we have some places on the golf course where irrigation, rain, or other natural forces have altered the putting green, you are not allowed to fix those. So let Mother Nature do what she's going to do, and you got to accept what she has done in this case. And if the irrigation is also causing that issue as well, you're not allowed to fix maybe a trough or try to get that trough back into place that was caused by the water runoff. Not allowed by this rule. Natural surface imperfections such as weeds, areas of bare diseased area or uneven growth or soil or dirt, you're not allowed to fix those. You just have to deal with the consequence there. So if you have a weed growing on your line, you can't just pull it up and tap down the dirt that comes up there. This would be a violation of this rule, so you're still not allowed to do this. And the natural wear of the hole. So if we have raggedness around the hole from being played and from people, the ball hitting it and so on and so forth, you are not allowed to fix that. The flag stick is different, as we noticed. The flag stick damaging the hole has its own specific exemption in this rule, but natural wear of the hole, such as the volcano effect or the lumpy donut that you hear about. If people generally walk around a hole, they don't walk right on top of the lip, they're walking around it, and it kind of causes a little bit of maybe a slope into the hole. You're not allowed to tap that down around the hole because that is the natural wear of the hole. All right, so those are the damage rules that we have now changed for the new rules, but we're going to move forward and now talk about what we're going to do if a ball or a ball marker moves on the putting green. We have to know what caused this thing to happen, whether it was a person, an outside influence, or natural forces to apply this Rule 13.1D. But there are two specific rules for a ball or ball marker that moves on the putting green. And there's going to be no penalty for accidentally causing a ball to move, and what we're going to do if natural forces cause the ball to move. Okay, so again, there's no penalty for accidentally causing the ball to move if the player, the opponent, or another player in stroke play accidentally moves the player's ball or ball marker on the putting green. So what is an example of an accident? It's like I've talked before, it's like a whoopsie. I didn't mean to, and something happened that was kind of out of my control. A little bit different than the words of English. If you accidentally mark the wrong ball, that is still a purposeful act. That is not an accident within the rules of golf. And I'll have some examples talking about that here shortly.
Under the 2019 rules, if you accidentally move your ball or ball marker on the putting green, there is no penalty. For example, if you accidentally move your ball in making a practice swing or in preparing for your stroke, drop your ball marker on your ball and move it. Move your ball with your foot. Or cause your ball marker to move. There is no penalty, and you simply replace your ball or ball marker on its original spot.
Okay, so all those accidental motions will get the ball back in its position without penalty. Another one that they may or may not have mentioned there is a practice swing. If you're just taking a practice swing and you accidentally hit your ball on the putting green, that it's not a stroke, we're going to replace it without penalty in that case as well. Okay, so we're going to replace the ball in its original spot. Okay, we're not going to replace a ball, we're going to replace the ball. So when your ball at rest is moved, you have to replace the original ball back unless that ball is not recoverable. We're going to place a ball marker on that original spot as well. So you don't have to necessarily replace the ball or the ball marker. Either one will work in this situation if either one is moved. Oops. All right. So the exception is the ball must be played as it lies when the ball begins to move during the backswing of the stroke and the stroke is made. So as we talked about in Rule 9 a couple of weeks ago, if you start to take a backswing and the ball moves and you complete the swing, there's going to be no penalty for playing the ball when it's moving, and we're also not going to replace the ball. We're going to play it as it lies as a result of that stroke. You see this player here takes the stroke, the ball moves forward, and he hits it while it's moving. We're going to take the result of the stroke, no penalties, and play the ball as it lies. Okay. If a player or the opponent deliberately lifts the player's ball or ball marker on the putting green, we're going to look at rules 9.4 and 9.5 to see if there's a penalty. So again, a deliberate action of marking a ball is not an accident. They have a purposeful act. They are meaning to mark and lift this ball, and just because it was an accident of the wrong ball, the rules are going to see if there's going to be a penalty or not. In general, in match play, if you accidentally mark your opponent's ball, you are not going to get a penalty. That is a change of the rules. So there's an exemption within that rule that's not going to penalize the player for accidentally marking the wrong ball in that situation. Okay, when a ball to be replaced needs to be moved by natural forces, we need to determine what is going on the putting green. Has the ball been marked or has the ball not been marked is going to be the key determining factor what we're going to do with that golf ball. So if the ball is already lifted and replaced, we're going to deal with it with natural forces moving it in one way, and if the ball is not already lifted and replaced, we're going to deal with it in another way. I'll show you what we're talking about here. So if the ball is already lifted and replaced, the ball must be replaced on its original spot. We mentioned this earlier in the rules talk today, that once that ball has been marked on the putting green, it owns that territory. It's its land. So no matter what causes the ball to move, we are going to replace it. Anywhere else on the golf course, if natural forces cause that ball to move, we're going to accept where that ball comes to rest and play it from there without penalty. So if it's not moved by the player or the opponent or an outside influence and we can't determine what has moved it, we are going to, by default, say that natural forces has moved the ball. Now again, if the ball has been marked, it doesn't matter. We're going to replace it. But if the ball was not marked, now we're going to default to the natural forces if we can't determine who or what caused it to move.
After you mark, lift, and then replace your ball on the putting green, if it moves for any reason, including through your own accidental actions or for some other reason such as wind, always replace your ball back on its original spot. If you don't know the exact spot, Estimate it as accurately as you can and replace the ball there.
Okay, so the natural forces caused that ball to move, and she had marked it, so she has to replace it by this rule. Okay, the next rule is pretty simple and straightforward. The ball's not already lifted and replaced. The ball must be played from its new spot. This is just pointing it out that it's true everywhere on the golf course, but since we have a special exemption of where we have to replace the ball underneath this rule, we have to point out that you're not going to replace it when natural forces move it if it has not been marked and lifted at this point. Also keep in mind, putting a mark down on a golf ball does not take the ball out of play. So the ball, if you have a marker just set down and the ball moves by natural forces, you haven't lifted it, we're going to play where it comes to rest. So just because you have a mark in position doesn't take the ball out of play. Remember, lifting the ball is going to take the ball out of play. Okay, and here's an example again of a video where a ball is just going to move on its own. Very slight movement, just moved on its own. We're going to deal with it whether or not it has been marked. If it has been marked again, we're going to replace it. If it has not been marked, we're going to take it from its new location. You can mark it and reset it if you want at that point because the ball is just in play as a continuation of its previous stroke. Okay. 13.1e talks about the deliberate testing of the green. So during a round or while play is stopped under 5.7a, a player must not deliberately take these actions to test a putting green or a wrong green by rubbing the surface or rolling a ball. So we're not allowed to get out there and try to see if it's wet or how thick it is during the round or during a stoppage of play. Okay. There is an exception, of course, testing greens between two holes. So between two holes, the player may rub the surface or roll the ball on the putting green of the hole just completed or any practice green, which is the same stipulations that is in Rule 5.5b for practice. So you're allowed to make practice strokes after completing a hole. You're allowed to test the greens after completing a hole, but you're only allowed to test the green of the hole you just played or any practice green. If you test a putting green or a wrong green, you're going to be in a breach of 13.1e and get the general penalty, loss of hole match play, 2 strokes in stroke play. Okay, 13.1f is going to talk about relief from a wrong green. We're going to find out what interference is, which is a little bit of a change this year, and relief must be taken, which is not a change. So good example here, an overhead shot of Prairie Dunes Country Club. The correct green there in the yellow being played is the 9th green. And then we have a couple of practice greens, one to the left there and one up on the top of the screen, and you have the 7th green over there to the right. Those are all wrong greens when you are playing the 9th hole. And so if your ball comes to rest or your stance is interfered with by these greens, which is going to take a pretty bad shot, by the way, if you've played Prairie Dunes, you have to really get way off course for that. But if you have interference from a wrong putting green, you must take relief. We'll talk about that procedure moving forward here. So if any part of the player's ball touches a wrong putting green, lies on or anything such as a loose impediment, like we talked about earlier, if a ball is on a loose impediment and within the edge of the putting green, it is on the green, so obviously the wrong green stipulations will apply as well. If it is on that wrong green, or a wrong green physically interferes with the player's intended stance or swing, we now have interference. So whether your feet are touching it or your follow through is going to hit a wrong green or your ball is on the putting green that is wrong, we have interference and we must take relief. So we cannot play the ball as it lies. Instead, the player must take free relief by dropping the original ball or another ball in this relief area. So again, we're dropping a ball, so substitution is allowed. And then the relief area is going to be defined as follows. The reference point is going to be the nearest point of complete relief in the same area of the course where the original ball came to rest. So what does that mean? So if the ball was on a wrong putting green, where is the ball located on the golf course? It is located in the general area. It is not on the putting green because it is not the green of the hole you are playing. So this reference point is referring to it must be in the general area. So the ball came to rest. Now there are examples of where your ball might come to rest in a bunker, a greenside bunker of a wrong putting green, and your stance would be on that putting green. Okay, so here's an example of where the reference point would be in the bunker. So you still might be standing on the wrong putting green, but your ball might be in the bunker. So now your reference point would be within that bunker. So that's what this rule really is pointing out, is that now that we have interference also with a stance, not just the lie of the ball, your ball could be in a greenside bunker or a penalty area for that matter as well. So the size of the relief area measured from the reference point is 1 club length for this situation, but with these limits. Must be the same area as the course as the reference point. So if our reference point is in the general area, so must the relief area, and so on and so forth. It must not be near the hole of the reference point, which is true of all relief areas for the most part. A couple of exceptions that I will talk about in different rules. And there must be complete relief from all interference by the wrong green. So you'll notice in the rules when they are talking about these relief areas and the stipulations, each rule has its own little kind of nuances and different things. The specific relief area for a wrong putting green says that you have to take full relief from the wrong putting green. So you can't be standing on it or have your ball touching it or have your intended swing touch the green when you are taking relief from a wrong putting green. It is the same situation that we have known for many years for taking relief from an obstruction. You must take full relief in this situation. Okay. So now moving on, after the wrong putting green, we're going to move into 13.2. So now we've got all the different things in 13.1 taken care of. We're going to talk about the flag stick now. The purpose of this rule is the player may leave the flag stick in the hole or have it removed, but the player must decide before making a stroke. So when a player has the flag removed from the hole, that also includes attendance of the flag. They are intending to have the attendant remove the flag once the stroke is made. So that is carried underneath this rule of removing the flag stick from the hole. Not a requirement, but you will see that we still have penalties that are involved if the attendant or the flag stick is struck by a ball in motion. But again, this must be decided before making the stroke. There's normally no penalty if the ball hits the flag stick. Usually it's going to be just left in the hole or an accidental, but there are situations where striking the flag stick is a penalty, which is hence the word normally is used and not always. And this rule applies anytime the ball is played on the golf course, whether it's the teeing area, penalty area, bunker, general area, or the putting green. So all the rules are similar for all areas of the golf course. Okay, 13.2a is going to be divided up into these 4 parts. We're going to talk about that the player may leave the flag stick in the hole, and there's no penalty if the ball hits that flag stick that is left in the hole. But there's also limitations on moving or removing the flag stick when a ball is in motion. There are some unique rules and things that we have to be aware of when a ball is in motion and whether or not a removal of any type of object can influence that ball in motion. And the flag stick has its own special stipulations within that rule as well. And limitation on other players moving or removing the flag stick when the player's decided to leave it in the hole. So if the player wants that flag stick left there, we've got some limitations on what other players can't do in that situation. So under 1, the player may leave the flag stick in the hole with that flag stick left in the hole so it is possible for the ball in motion to hit the flag stick. And this is under any reason that the player wants to do this. He can, if it thinks it helps him, great. If he wants it just there for looks, it doesn't matter. Intent is not an issue here. He can flat out leave the flag stick in the hole for any reason he wants. And the player must decide this before making the stroke by either leaving the flag stick where it is in the hole or moving it so that it's centered in the hole and leaving it there. So you cannot take the flag stick and move it from a position that is centered and put it leaning in a certain direction. This rule only allows you to recenter the flag stick in the hole or simply replace the flag stick if it was removed at any point. Okay, in either case, the player must not try to gain an advantage by deliberately moving the flag stick to a position other than centered in the hole. So if you, like I mentioned, if you want this flag stick to lean away from you on a downhill chip shot, you think it's going to collect the ball or anymore, this rule does not allow you to do that. So if the player does so and the ball in motion hits the flag stick, he or she gets the general penalty. So here's a situation where if you put that flag stick in a different orientation so it will help you and you miss the flag stick, you're not penalized. This rule specifically states, and the ball in motion then hits the flag stick. So an intent rule here isn't just intent, it's intent and result. No penalty if the ball hits the flag stick left in the hole. So if the player makes a stroke with the flag stick left in the hole and the ball in motion then hits the flag stick, there's no penalty and we're going to play as it lies. So if it goes in the hole, we're going to accept that result as playing as it lied in the hole, or if it deflects off the flag stick and comes to rest anywhere on the golf course, we're going to deal with it from there. Okay, so let's talk about the limitation on the player moving or removing the flag stick while the ball is in motion. So after making a stroke with the flag stick left in the hole, we've got an example here of a player's caddy. He's not attending the flag stick at this point. As you can see, he's away from the flag stick. There is no attendance going on. The player makes a stroke. The caddy or the player must not deliberately remove the flag stick to affect where the player's ball in motion might come to rest. And again, we will see this a little bit later in the rule, but this includes your partner. So where it doesn't say the word partner, but your partner is still included in the situation. So your partner, your caddy, cannot move this flag stick. There, the stroke is made. The caddy goes over, removes the flag stick. The player is going to get the general penalty in this situation because he removed the flag stick with the ball in motion while not attending it, and it might have affected the path of the ball. So we don't have to have the ball hit the flag stick for this rule. So 13.2a simply says do not move the flag stick with the ball in motion where it might affect the ball in motion. If this is done, the player will get the general penalty. So the caddy obviously can't get a penalty. The partner will not get the penalty in this situation. The player will get the penalty in this situation. But there is no penalty if the player has the flag stick left the hole removed or removed for any other reason, such as when he reasonably believes it's not going to hit the flag stick. So in this little picture right here, the ball is a couple of feet outside the hole and is moving away from the flag stick. The caddy grabs the flag stick at this point. There's no reasonable belief that the ball is going to hit the flag stick. He is okay. Again, we're going to trust the players, or in this case, the caddy's reasonable judgment that it's not going to hit the flag stick. There's no reason to penalize the player in this situation. Okay. 13.2a4 is talking about the limitation on other players moving or removing the flag stick when the player's decided to leave it in the hole. So when the player has left the flag stick in the hole and has not authorized anyone to attend the flag stick, and Rule 13.2p we'll talk about here in just a second of what authorization is. Another player must not deliberately move or remove the flag stick to affect where the player's ball in motion might come to rest. So now we have the same animation here, but now this is another player. The ball has been struck and another player comes over and removes the flag stick to affect the ball in motion. Now the other player is going to get the penalty in this situation, not the putter, not the person who struck the ball. The other player gets the general penalty. So hopefully that's clear that somebody on your side that is, your caddy or your partner moves that flag stick, you're going to get the penalty. But if somebody that's not part of your side it removes that flag stick, you're not going to get the penalty. It makes pretty good sense to talk about that. And again, this is when the flag stick has not been authorized to be attended.
I'm jumping in. Is there an eraser rule? If he goes like this and goes, oh, and the ball's still coming?
And that's a good question. So like if a ball is rolling at a flag stick and he goes to remove it and says, oops, I accidentally moved it. Accidental movement here is actually covered in this because it says deliberately moving it for the purpose of deflecting the ball. So if the player takes it out and didn't realize that the ball was on the way and puts it back in, there's going to be no penalty. And that is a good example in that situation because the player's action was not deliberately to affect the ball. Now, it was a deliberate action of taking the flag stick out, but that's not what the rule is talking about. The rule is talking specifically about to affect the ball in motion. That's a good point. Okay, but there's no penalty if the other player or his or her caddy removes the flag stick for any reason, such as we talked about, where like the player the ball's not going to hit it, and that other player says, "Well, I'm going to take the flag stick out. It's fine," but is not aware that the player's about to play or the player's ball's in motion. Kind of what we just talked about with Jim's question right there. If the person is not aware the ball is in motion and we take it out, you don't even have to put it back in that situation. But if he does put it back in, he's okay as well. But this specifically talks about, well, I didn't know your ball was in motion, so we're not going to penalize the other player in that situation away. Okay, so the player may have the flag stick removed from the hole under 13.2b. The player may make a stroke with the flag stick removed from the hole so that his or her ball in motion will not hit the flag stick in the hole, which is the whole reason why somebody would take the flag stick out anyway. So we don't want it to hit the flag stick, although there wouldn't be a penalty if he did. Okay, so the player must decide this before making the stroke. And they talk about this a number of times in this Rule 13 before making the stroke. So the flag stick's got to either be out or left in before the stroke is made. You can't make these decisions once you've made a stroke and the ball is in motion. So the player may have the flag stick removed from the hole before playing the ball, and this is anywhere on the golf course, or the player may have the flag stick attended, authorizing someone to attend the flag stick, which means first to remove it by first holding the flag stick at the hole or in the hole or above the hole to show where the hole is. So we can take it out a little bit. It can even be off to the side a little bit It doesn't have to be directly in the hole. It says next to the hole, but we're not going to let you move 10, 12, 15 feet away, but right next to the hole is okay. For example, if you didn't want to stand in somebody else's line and you wanted to move the flag stick a couple inches off to the side, this rule does allow that. But there's examples of an attendant just in the hole, or you can hold it above the hole. And again, this may be done anywhere on the golf course, not just the putting green. Okay, then removing the flag stick after the stroke is made. So this is very important to note this, because there's been a lot of questions already about the flag stick striking, or excuse me, the ball striking a flag stick while it's attended. It says here that we have to remove the flag stick. So if the player wants the flag stick attended, that flag stick has to come out after the stroke is made. The player is treated as having authorized the flag stick to be attended underneath these three situations. So one, the player's caddy is holding the flag stick, he's flat out attending it, and the player sees it and doesn't object or doesn't say anything. Now he's treated as authorizing that caddy to do that. Or he's standing right next to the hole to where he can grab the flag stick. People might remember the decision that talked about, if you're close enough to grab the flag stick, then you're deemed to be attending it. Now we're treating that caddy as doing it as well, even if the player is not aware the caddy is doing so. So the caddy also has a special situation where if he's standing there, the player doesn't even have to know about it, and he is treated as attending this flag stick. Same thing with the partner. Again, the partner is going to fall underneath this. So once a player also authorizes somebody by definition or verbally or however we're going to talk about it, the player is going to be responsible for all actions of that attendant. Strokes involved with penalties, so on and so forth. The second example there is if the player flat out says attend the flag stick. So now we have a direct authority for attendance of the flag stick, and that's any person. So that's not just your partner or your caddy, but once the player authorizes a spectator, for example, which we really don't want them doing that, but it is allowed within the rules. And that person also does that. Now we have authority to do that. So if I ask Jim to attend the flag stick and he doesn't, I have not authorized Jim to attend it because he's not doing it. Once he does attend the flag stick, now I have given him the authority, and now Jim is going to be acting on my behalf, and I will get penalties involved if I do have anything that Jim does. And then Jim won't attend my flag stick anymore. Okay, the third example of this is the player sees any other person, which is not the caddy or your partner, holding the flag stick in, above, or next to the hole. So basically, if he sees somebody attending the flag stick and makes no objection, then we have the authority that is granted at that point. So the player must say no or move away or get out of the way if he does not want the flag stick attended. If the player sees it and says nothing, we have him treating it as authority. Okay, so what are we going to do when the ball hits the flag stick or the attendant in this case? So if a player's ball motion does hit a flag stick and that player had decided to have it removed under the examples that we just talked about, or hits the person who's attending the flag stick, we need to know if it was deliberate or accidental. And here's where it's going to get a little bit kind of, don't want to say confusing, but it could be a little contentious on what an accident is versus a deliberate action. But the rules do spell it out pretty specifically, and I will go over that with everybody right now. Okay, so if the ball accidentally hits the flag stick or the person who is moving is attending it, we are not going to have a penalty and the ball is going to be played as it lies. What is an accident? Okay, an accident would be, for example, the flag is stuck in the liner and we can't get it out and it hits the flag stick. That's an accident. The attendant is not paying attention. It's just kind of off in his own world or whatever, and it accidentally hits the flag stick. Or the attendant takes the flag stick out and drops it accidentally and it hits the flag stick accidentally. Or he can't get out of the way in time. So those are basically your examples of an accident. If you are just attending the flag stick and you watch the putt go the entire length and it hits the flag stick and you don't move, this is not an accident. This is deliberately leaving the flag stick in the hole when you had plenty of opportunity to get out of the way. And then we would have a penalty in that situation. So accidents are very specific in what they are going to be to this rule. Okay, so let's talk about that deliberate action. So if we have any of these deliberate actions, if the person who is attending the flag stick deliberately deflects or stops the player's ball in motion, Rule 11.2c applies, which is a ball played from a putting green deliberately deflected. So we will deal with it in that case if we have a deliberate deflection. Again, an example of a deliberate deflection is just standing there and not moving. or if the ball is coming really fast and you don't remove the flag stick because you don't want it to go past the hole, that's a deliberate action. And so we have to determine whether or not it is deliberate. But just not moving is going to be a deliberate action, for example, for this rule. And it will also spell that out here a little bit in the text of the rule as well. What are we going to do is with the ball when it is played in this situation? So the player must not take the ball, play the ball as it lies, and must instead take relief under 11.2c. So if we have a ball played from a putting green, and 11.2c says we're going to cancel and replay the stroke. So it is treated as hitting a movable obstruction in this case because it was deliberately deflected. And also we have the example of 11.2c where a ball is deliberately deflected. We're going to estimate where it comes to rest, except when it's played on the putting green. When it's played on the putting green, then we cancel and replay. So when the penalty applies, if the person who deliberately deflected or stopped the ball was a player or his caddy, and again, the partner is included in that text, that player gets the general penalty. So what does this mean is the person who played the stroke has got this player tending the flag stick and acting on his behalf. So the player is going to get the penalty if the partner or the caddy or the person who is treated as authorized attending this flag stick creates this deliberate penalty. The player will get the penalty in this situation because the player has authorized it. So again, it gets a little confusing what they're talking about there, but you hit a putt and it hits the attendant, the person who hit the putt is getting the penalty. Okay, and here's where I was talking about the clarification of what an accident is. So for purposes of this rule, deliberately deflected or stopped includes, when we're talking about this player's ball in motion, includes a removed flag stick, an attended flag stick, or the person who attended to remove the flag stick. So all these people that are involved in this situation and all these objects, we have deliberate deflections underneath this rule based on certain situations that we've talked about. For example, a removed flag stick that was deliberately positioned or left in a particular place on the ground so that it might deflect or stop the ball. I talk about the example that I always know about Payne Stewart at Wolf Creek, where he deliberately put the flag stick behind the hole so that it wouldn't roll off the green. This would be an example of that. He's deliberately put the flag stick in there, so he's going to deal with a deliberate situation here with the penalty. An attended flag stick that the person deliberately failed to remove from the hole or to move out of the way of the ball. So here's what we're talking about is if the player just stood there that was holding the flag stick and just didn't get out of the way, right there it's saying that it's the deliberate action. So I'm not just making that up, it's actually there in the rule. Okay. Again, the person who attended to remove the flag stick or anything the person was holding, so I mean if you happen to be holding another club as well, or anything else, when he or she deliberately failed to move out of the way of the ball, if it strikes any of that person, we have a deliberate deflection of the ball. We're going to have a penalty on that player or the putter if we have an authorization going on, and we're going to cancel and replay that stroke. Okay, so we do have some exceptions, of course, to talk about. So we have restrictions on deliberately moving a flag stick to affect a ball in motion. Under Rule 11.3, if a removed flag stick is on the green, we know we can move it. But we also have some deliberately moving objects that could alter conditions to affect a ball in motion that are covered in Rule 11.3, not covered in Rule 13.2. So again, a removed flag stick can be deliberately moved to keep a ball from hitting it. And a flag stick may be moved if it's being attended, as we know. So we're not going to have a penalty in that situation. So the flag stick's got its own special rules depending on the status of the flag stick, where it is. Again, this is no change from the old rules. This is just being spelled out again for us here in 2019. All right, so if you guys have any questions on that flag stick stuff and it's very confusing, please let me know because it can be an interesting situation, especially involving a ball in motion and who gets the penalty. But you can send me your questions because I know you can't ask me one right now. All right, so let's talk about the ball resting against the flag stick in the hole. A little bit of a change to a definition of what hold means. So if a player's ball comes to rest against the flag stick left in the hole, if any part of the ball is in the hole and below the surface of the putting ground, the ball is treated as hold, even if the entire ball is not below the surface. So again, this is an adjustment to what we're used to, but now if the ball is, for example, in this picture here, that ball is hold. And it doesn't matter where it's played from because we know there's no penalty for playing it from the putting green. If this was this player's tee shot, it's his lucky day, that's going to be a 1. So he gets to go ahead and grab that ball and put it in a shadow box somewhere. So good for him. Okay. However, if no part of the ball is in the hole below the surface of the putting green, the ball is not holed, must be played as it lies. Okay, so it's going to be kind of a tough situation there. So the ball, like for example, if the flag stick is leaning a little bit towards you and the ball is up against the flag stick but not below the surface of the ground, even though part of it might be overhanging the hole, we do not have a holed golf ball. The ball has to be below the surface of the hole, of the ground. And so that's a good example of where this rule would kick in, where the ball is not in the hole. So the ball is not holed and must be played as it lies. So then in that situation, if we remove the flag stick and the ball moves or falls into the hole, there's no penalty and the ball must be replaced. So this is pretty straightforward and very consistent with the rest of the rules on the golf course. If you move a ball at rest, we're going to replace it. So if it happens to fall into the hole, sorry, you're going to replace it. But if it moves anywhere anyway, we're going to replace it without penalty because you're removing a movable obstruction technically there with the flag stick. So the rule will still apply. Okay. So if you happen to not replace that ball, this penalty statement will kick in and we will get a general penalty for not replacing the golf ball and playing it from a wrong spot. And then as we know, by a lot of our other rules, if we have multiple breaches, we're going to see Rule 1.3C4 and see if we have multiple penalties or just a single penalty. In stroke play, keep in mind the player is disqualified if he or she does not hole out under Rule 3.3C. So you're still required to hold the ball out. If you just go ahead and pick up your ball in that special situation that we were talking about and just move on, your ball is not holed. You're going to get disqualified if you do not correct that error before teeing off the next hole or on 18 before returning your scorecard. All right, we've reached 13.3, the ball overhanging the hole. This rule is generally the same as it has always been with one little tweak that we will talk about involving match play. But it is the same procedure that we know about, the 10-second waiting and so on and so forth. So let's go over that. If any part of a player's ball overhangs the lip of the hole, the player is allowed a reasonable time to get there. So if you hit that long putt that comes to rest over the hole, we'll give you a little bit of, oh my God, it didn't go in, and a little bit of dramatics. But you need to get moving and get toward the hole within a reasonable amount of time. Once you reach the hole, you have an additional 10 seconds to determine if that ball is at rest, to see if it will fall into the hole as well. And then if that ball falls into the hole during this waiting time, the player is holed out with his previous stroke. So if you're still within that 10 seconds, the ball drops in, the last stroke is all that matters. There's no penalty, and it counts as if you made it. If the ball does not fall into the hole in this waiting time, we've got some things that we got to talk about. First of all, it's treated as being at rest. Even if it is still wobbling at that point or slightly moving around the hole, after 10 seconds, that ball is at rest within the rules of golf. If the ball then falls the hole before it is played, the player is holed out with the previous stroke, but we're going to add the penalty stroke. Again, this is no change that we're used to, but the player is going to add a penalty stroke if that 10 seconds has elapsed. Okay. Now, the 13.3b actually addresses if the ball is moved while it is overhanging the hole, which was not really addressed directly in the rules before, but now it is. So if a ball is overhanging the hole, is lifted or moved before the waiting time, that 10-second waiting time that we're talking about has ended, the ball is treated as having come to rest. So if we do have somebody move the ball within 3 seconds, for example, we are going to treat that ball as being at rest. However, we're going to deal with it in a certain way in match play and stroke play. So the ball, first of all, must be replaced at that situation. So we know that we've got to replace it on the lip of the hole. But then we're not going to get any more time again for like a 10-second to see if it falls back in. Once that ball has been moved, again, it says it's been treated as being at rest, so we're going to replace it, but you don't get to start another count, unfortunately. So that waiting time will no longer apply. Now, if that ball moves by natural forces, we're going to see underneath 9.3 what we're going to do. And if anybody thinks that we're going to just let that go in, unfortunately, no, because that ball has been replaced on the putting green. We're going to actually replace it again. So now, if the opponent in match play or another player in stroke play deliberately lifts or moves the ball overhanging the hole before the waiting time is ended, we're going to deal with it differently in situations. And this is a neat little tweak that I'm a big fan of. Doesn't happen often, but I do remember a certain executive director of the Kansas City Golf Association that picked up my ball that was overhanging a lip once before the 10-second time limit had expired, and I thought it was going to fall in, and he didn't, and so now this new rule would have been in my favor. I don't know who I'm talking about, but maybe you do. All right, so in match play, if the player's ball is now treated as hold. So if one of your opponents, whether it's four ball or whatever, or foursomes or whatever match you're playing, if the other side picks up your ball that is overhanging the lip or moves it before the 10-second time limit is, it's considered hold with the previous stroke, and there's no penalty to the other player, to the other side. New little change there. So, for example, if I have a putt for a birdie that's overhanging the lip, and I do my dramatics and I walk up to the hole, and after 5 seconds I'm sitting there watching it, my opponent says, "Oh, that's good, pick it up, nice par." I'm going to get the birdie in that situation. It's going to be treated as hold. So that's a change, that little tweak that I told you about. In stroke play, the player who lifted that ball, so if we're playing stroke play in that same example, that player is going to get a 2-stroke penalty for moving my ball. I, however, have to replace it and play on. So I don't get to consider it hold in that situation. So that birdie putt that is overhanging the lip, somebody comes over and picks it up in a stroke play situation, that somebody's going to get a 2-stroke penalty. I've got to replace my ball and tap in my par. So a little bit different there in stroke play and match play. But again, we're talking about a small bubble in match play where the two sides are concerned with each other, but stroke play is dealing with the entire field. And so the entire field can't see what's going on. So we're at least going to penalize that player who did that action 2 strokes, but I still have to hole out. All right, so that's Rule 13. So I've got a couple questions to ask here that'll get us going, and then we'll go over the quiz review. So, in the stroke play event, Bailey's ball is at rest on a putting green. She sees some animal hoof damage on her line of play. Without delaying play, she uses a small garden tool to repair the line. Which of the following is true? It's either A, Bailey's not penalized, this is allowed, or Bailey's penalized 2 strokes for using a tool that is not allowed, or Bailey is penalized 2 strokes for repairing that animal damage, or Bailey's disqualified. So to break this down, like I do with all my questions, I like to think of them as little steps at a time of what we're going to do. First of all, is this a penalty? And the answer is yes. She's going to be penalized because she's using a tool that is not allowed. It specifically says in the rules that she has to use a divot tool, a pitch mark tool, a tee, or a club. Using a small garden tool is going to be a violation. Is she allowed to repair that damage? And the answer is yes. We now can repair animal hoof damage. So now I think we're getting to the point where we can come up with a good ruling. She is going to get 2 strokes, the general penalty for using that tool that is not allowed, but she can repair that damage. All right, we're going to move on to the quiz review now. All right, question number 1, true or false? Aerification holes may be repaired on the putting green as long as play is not unreasonably delayed. As we know, aerification holes are not allowed to be repaired anymore. So that is false under Rule 13.1c2. Aerification holes are a regular maintenance practice and must be left as is. B, relief must be taken for a stance that is on a wrong green, and that answer is now true. Rule 13.1f2 says interference does exist on a wrong putting green when we have our stance on there as well. So stance, lie of ball, area of intended swing, all are factors of interference on a wrong putting green. C, if a ball is in motion and the player's caddy removes the flagstick from the hole to avoid the ball striking it, there's no penalty if the ball does not hit the flagstick. In this situation, the caddy is not attending the flag. It does not say that he's attending the flag, so we probably do have a violation. False. Removing a flagstick with a ball motion is an intent rule, and the penalty is applied whether or not the ball hits the flagstick, and we specifically pointed that out earlier. D, a ball in motion is played from the putting green, accidentally strikes a removed flagstick that is on the fringe. There is no penalty. True or false? That word accidental is in there, so we probably know that we're not going to get a penalty, and that is true. Rule 13.2b2, if the ball accidentally strikes the flagstick, there's no penalty, and the ball is played as it lies. So wherever we put the flagstick, if that flagstick's on the green, in the general area, or penalty area, or bunker, wherever we put it, as long as it's not put there with the intent of stopping the golf ball, we're going to have an accidental striking of the flagstick, and the ball is going to be played as it lies. E, a ball touching the putting green and the general area is on the putting green, and that answer is now true. As we know, it has always been true, but again, it does say touching, so it is not overhanging. So if the ball is just overhanging the putting green and touching the general area, it is in the general area, but if any part of the ball is touching the green and the general area, it is on the green. All right, some situational questions. In stroke play, Doug removes the flagstick for Todd's eagle putt. Another eagle putt for me. They're very frequent in golf. In the process, the hole is damaged. So before he makes a stroke, Todd uses his hand to fix the damage to the hole, restoring the dimensions of the hole. Which of the following is correct? So again, if we break this out, is this a situation where the damage could be repaired? And the answer is yes. It has been caused by a flagstick, even though it just happened right in front of me, whether or not it's a group in front of me or whatever, it doesn't matter. Doug damaged the hole with the flagstick, I can repair that. And so repairing, I can use my hand. There's no problem with me doing that. So I'm not penalized under Rule 13.1C2. I'm allowed to repair that damage specifically in any way to get those dimensions back as they were before. Question number 3, in stroke play, Taylor has a putt for a birdie and the flagstick is in the hole and leaning away from her. She adjusts the flagstick to a center position and holds the putt with the flagstick in the hole. Which of the following is correct? Well, does anything here seem bad in that situation? No, she's allowed to center that flagstick. She's allowed to putt with the flagstick in now, and the ball can hit the flagstick. So there is no penalty under 13.2A1. Taylor's allowed to recenter it, and she can hit the flagstick, no problem. Okay, question number 4. In stroke play, Doug's ball is at rest in a bunker. On his backswing, he touches some leaves lying behind the ball and makes the stroke. What is the correct ruling? And again, I like to put some of these old decisions out there because there's a lot of us that are interested in the changes. Moving forward, we don't really care about the old rules, but it is an interesting little fact to see what is different and what is maybe the same. So touching the leaves on the backswing, is this going to be a violation? And the answer is no. We are allowed to touch loose impediments in a bunker now. And so taking a swing is not going to be a violation if he touches the loose impediment. However, if he touches the sand, we do know that that is a penalty. But in this situation, there is never a penalty for touching or removing loose impediments from a bunker unless your ball moves, as we've talked about there. But the restrictions remain for touching the sand. Question number 5. In stroke play, Jackie blades a bunker shot that comes to rest in a red penalty area. She elects to play again from the original spot in the bunker. Before dropping, she rakes the area where she played from and drops the ball in that spot. She makes the stroke. So what is the correct ruling? So we have a ball that is played from a bunker, and it is outside of the bunker and in a penalty area. So we know from the rules now that she is allowed, without restriction, to rake the bunker, footprints, the divot, the explosion, all that good stuff. So she's not going to be penalized even though she is improving the area where she is going to drop a golf ball. So there's no penalty in this procedure, but this is also the way it has been before. The old ruling was the same way. If you were going to play a ball from a bunker and it comes to rest outside the bunker, the same rule applies. We can fix anything that is in that bunker. Okay, question number 6. Which of the following, possibly multiple of these, will result in a penalty? A player moves a pebble behind a ball in the bunker, the ball does not move. We've hit this ad nauseum, but moving a loose impediment in a bunker is not going to be a penalty. So there's no penalty. Loose impediments may be moved when your ball is in the bunker and the ball didn't move. A player makes a practice swing 30 feet away from his ball in the bunker, touching the sand. Well, didn't move his ball, but he did touch the sand with a practice swing, and the rules specifically use the word practice swing is not allowed. So we do have a penalty in this situation. Under 12.2b1, a player may not touch the sand while making a practice swing anywhere in that same bunker. A player hits the sand with a club in anger after leaving the ball in the same bunker after a stroke, so there's a specific exception to the rule. If you leave a ball in the bunker or any reason at all and you angrily strike the sand, you're exempt from penalty. There's not going to be a penalty in this situation. We are allowed under 12.2b to do this. Okay, D, a player rakes footprints in the same bunker his ball is in before playing a stroke and it does not improve conditions affecting the stroke. Well, the way that that question is written, we're looking at this is probably going to be allowed, so he's not affecting his conditions that affect his stroke, but he's also doing it for the care of the course. So a player may rake the bunker as long as they do not improve those conditions that affect the stroke. I would watch the line of play, though. If you do have some footprints that are on your line of play, I would leave those alone. However, the rule says if you're doing it strictly for care of the course, you're okay, but it's going to be hard to convince somebody of that if you have footprints on your line and you're raking those for care of the course. So please be aware of that situation. But again, we are going to ask the player what their intent was and trust that they are going to do it right and ask them, was it for the care of the course? And if they say yes, we're going to accept that. Okay, E, a player sticks the handle end of a rake 6 inches deep into the bunker where his or her ball is at rest and it does not improve the conditions affecting the stroke. Are we going to get a penalty in this situation? And the answer is yes. Because we have a testing of the surface going on there. It's a violation to test the bunker to get the information. So sticking that rake down into the bunker is going to see how deep it is, and we're not going to allow that to happen. So it doesn't change any decision or any ruling that we've had before. So, all right, well, that is our rules 12 and 13. A little bit of a quicker video for everybody to kind of go through. I didn't have a lot of interaction, so it is pretty quick, but you're allowed to kind of stop and rewind and do everything that you want. But again, if you have any questions, please email me, call me, do whatever you do that you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. We will be back in class, our next session on Tuesday, February 5th, talking about Rule 14, which will be a very complicated rule, so it gets its own session all to itself over at St. Andrews, talking about that on the 5th of February. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.